Hello, grade 9s. Today's lesson is on using graphs to estimate values. We're working through linear relations very well. We've only got a couple more things to cover. Essentially, at this point, we're starting to tie things together, which is really nice. Remember, you started off by learning what a relation was, then you learned how to make an equation based on that relation, and then you learned on graphing, and then you're relating equations to graphs. So you see, we're slowly getting into more and more important issues. Today, we're going to look at using graphs to estimate values. So sometimes you won't know what values you're working with. You'll only be given a picture. When I say picture, I mean graph. But you can use that graph to help estimate what those values can be. And I have to say, this is something that maybe won't be obvious, but it is something that you'll be using for the most part in your life. It might not necessarily be directly using the picture to estimate values, but you'll have to make estimations. You'll have to make guesses on how far you can travel, or how much money you can spend, or how much of something you can do. And being able to estimate is a really valuable skill. So we're going to look at how we can work with picture, and if you learn how to draw the pictures, then maybe you'll be able to use that to your advantage as well. What we're starting off with is a table of values. This is looking at the population of, I don't know, maybe a city or a community of some sort, and their monthly water usage. And their water usage is measured in megaliters, not milliliters, but capital M-L. That will be megaliters. We might be able to get some data. We might be able to take a census or some averages of a census, so get a lot of information from a large population. And we're able to measure how much water they're using. And we've only got a couple of points, 4 points, but we can still plot that on a graph. And this is the graph that we get with the table of values. Now here's the issue. What if I want to do calculations on values that I haven't plotted, or values that are not on my table? How can I do that? And to make it a little easier to understand, I'm going to write a few of those queries down. Alrighty, so I have two queries here to consider. One of them is, what could the monthly water usage be for a population of 150,000? The second one is to estimate the population if 1,400 megaliters of water is used. Neither of those points show up on our table of values. Neither of those points show up on our graph. But we can use our graph to make estimates of that information. Starting with the first one, I'm looking for 150,000 people, or 150,000 population. So I have to find 150,000 on my graph. And there's two options for me. Either it's going to be my x-axis on the bottom, or my y-axis going up and down. And if the graph is a good graph, or a proper graph, it should have a label on it. I'm looking for population. Population is on the bottom of my graph. So 150,000 will be there. How do I know? Well, I know that 150,000 is halfway in between 100,000 and 200,000. So I just plot it halfway in between, and then all I have to do is find where that tick matches up with my line. So I'm going to trace it all the way up until I find my line. A little X there. And then I'm going to trace that X all the way to my y-axis and see what number it matches up with. Okay, and that matches up. So I have two X's there, so you can see where they match up. And that number is, halfway between 1,000 and 1,500 would be 1,250, which would be about over here. And I'm about halfway in between 1,000 and 1,250. So my estimation will be halfway in between those two numbers. In this case, that'll be 1,125 megaliters. And that would be my solution for the first part. The second question that I had, or the second query, was for you to estimate the population if 1,400 megaliters of water is used. So I have to find 1,400 on my y-axis now, because that's where my monthly water usage is labeled. And it looks like, well, I know 1,250 is right in the middle, and 1,400 has to be closer to 1,500, so it's probably somewhere around over here. Put a little star over there. So I'm going to trace a line from there all the way back to my graph. Ends up over there. You'll notice it's very close to another point, and that kind of makes sense because the point that I had was 1350, and 1400 is really close to that, so it should be very close. And then I trace down, and again, before I go there, I know that 1350 was 180,000, so I should be pretty close to 180,000. It's a little bit bigger. So I start that. I know this middle point here is 150K. I know that the midpoint over here is going to be 175,000. I know that this point's very close to 180,000. So you know what? Maybe my guess is about 185,000. It's just a guess. It's just, we call it an educated guess. So you're using the information that you have to make that educated guess. Now, what happens if you're not exactly correct? It doesn't matter. It's an estimation as long as you're somewhat close and you use logic, you use a picture to solve what you're looking for. That's reasonable. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I'll give you some practice on that so you can take a look and see if you can estimate some of the numbers. If your answers don't match up directly with mine, that's okay. If you're close, that means you're doing a good job. All right?